In simple terms, a third space is a place outside your home and your work where you can exist without obligation. Relationships are formed naturally, and you may just bump into someone that could change your life. Recently, many communities have been experiencing the death of third spaces. People are yearning for human connection without the space to create it. I believe that my guest today has bridged the gap between business and third place, upholding a stronghold for community in Ann Arbor. Today, I'm sitting down with Lisa McDonald, the owner of TeaHaus in Kerrytown. Lisa is one of the very few European trained tea sommeliers in the United States, the author of Tea for Dummies, and the woman behind one of the most beloved gathering spaces in the area. Tea House started as a tea store, evolved into a cafe and restaurant, and has since become a third space. Somewhere between home and work, where the Wi Fi is off, the conversation is on, and everybody is welcome. Let's get into it, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm so excited for our conversation.
Thank you.
Now, before we talk about Tea House, I want to talk about you. You were a professor, a business consultant, and you trained to become a tea sommelier in Europe. What are the most practical things you've carried from those worlds into this one?
It's a really good question. I think I have never been a very I've never taken a traditional path towards my education or towards my career. Obviously, I had gone backpacking to Europe right after I finished my degree with the intent of being only there for 3 months or so. And then I met a professor who was interested in what I taught or what I studied, had to learn German real quick, started teaching, and then started a consulting company, which actually used my degree, which was nice, obviously. And so I guess, I don't know what I took with me is that I guess not trying to fit into any specific career path, and eventually you're going to find the perfect path for you.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because especially in high school, we're all like expected to know what major we're gonna be in, like what we want to do for the rest of our lives. But a pivot can happen at any time, and it's definitely worked out for you. And now we're gonna go into some questions about Tea House. The first one is Tea House has gone through some transformations, just like you. It began as a tea store to cafe and restaurant to tea bar and lounge. Walk me through that evolution. Was it planned or did the community kind of pull you in this direction?
A little of both. I mean, you use the word pivot, and I think that
Mhm.
our careers can pivot, our lives can pivot, but also I think our businesses kind of have to if we want to survive,
Mm.
especially now as a small business in this world in this economy. But I think it was a natural progression in the beginning. I didn't want to get too crazy. I mean, my son was 3 days old when I opened, as well as I had a 2 year old. Everyone's like, "Oh, I was so hard with the baby." He was fine. He slept. But the 2 year old was a bit a bit annoying. No, and so I started out smaller as a tea store, and then it became quite quickly. I was aware of the fact that I think in the U.S. people associated a cup of tea with something to eat. I think we were heavily influenced by the British television shows, even though Germany is the largest tea purchasing country, not England. But so I realized quite quickly that people wanted a place to sit in a cafe experience. So I opened a cafe originally with just cafe items, and then it eventually kind of became bigger, and that we were a pretty big lunch spot to the point where prior to COVID, I was actually really trying to figure out how I could almost separate myself from that business. It was becoming more of a restaurant and cafe than a tea store. And in the end, I opened a tea store to start with. People would come in for lunch often, and they would have lunch every Wednesday. They would meet a friend for months. And then at some point, they would say, "This is really good tea. Where do you get it?" I'm like, "Through the door right there." And there's a huge hole in the wall. And so I have to say, like, as hard as COVID was on me, it was actually a really good time to kind of pull that band-aid off and say,
Mm.
okay, this is a good time for me to pivot into something new that was actually the original. And I had a way of getting out of it, so to say, by saying we still want to do food. The day the schools shut down, I started doing 500 free meals per week. They started out in the form of like sack lunches for schools, and then it became hot meals at the local shelter. And for me, that was a way where I could say, okay, I'm sorry that I don't have finger sandwiches and soup for you, but I just thought that providing free meals would be more important at this point. So it was kind of a way for me to like disappoint people, but also get away with it more. I believe the word ruined was in at least 9 or 10 different emails from people because I had ruined their lunch tradition or I had ruined their, favorite Tuesday with their friends or whatever. And, sorry. And then so it was for me during that COVID time, I just realized how disconnected we'd all become from each other.
Mhm.
And so when I reopened, I was like, okay, I can kind of have both. I can have some food available, but I really just wanted to focus on community space. I Around the corner I have my kitchen and what we now use as a private event space, so people can still have their full English tea services and that type of thing. They just have to pre-book it as a private event, and that's it. And I just kind of decided after so many years, I can kind of do what I wanted to with my own business. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it is your business, like, you did start it, and yeah,
yeah,
that's really inspiring. Because on one hand, like, you were kind of compromising with the community, but on the other hand, you just, like, took the reins on your own. And also, when I was 11 years old, my little sister was born, so I know what it's like to have, like, a toddler or, like, a newborn running around in my house. It is exhausting, so I'm, like, so impressed. I just yeah, so many sleepless nights. I made, like, countless amount of formula bottles, but you know what? It's worth it. And yeah, for Tea House, you've talked about like the idea of community and recapturing a third space. Can you explain what it means to you and why you felt like it was something worth fighting for?
absolutely. I mean, I knew I was taking a big risk, and I did in the beginning get a lot of negative pushback. I would say that pales in comparison to anything, versus all of the positive feedback I get now. I mean, it's very rare, if at all, anymore that I get any negative feedback about not allowing laptops or electronics, and we don't have Wi-Fi. I just feel like the community, for me, pre-COVID, people did come for lunch, and they would come with their friends, and they would come and they would meet, and we'd have the full English tea, and they'd make reservations. And the space around the corner, I allowed that space to be used for other community meetup groups. That maybe if one of my employees had a group that he knew needed a meeting space, as long as that employee was able to be there, they were allowed to use the space after close whenever they wanted. So we had, for example, before COVID, like a transgender meetup group that met once a week with one of my employees. We had a tango group with one of my employees that used the space for beginning tango until 2 or 3 in the morning. So it was a community space in that sense, and we closed at 7. So anyone could use the space after that free of charge, as long as one of my employees was like a sponsor of it, so to say. And then when we closed down, I just noticed how quickly that all went away. And even with my kids, I I'm old, so the whole concept of like playing with your friends but not seeing your friend in the room was just so weird to me. And and so that connectivity of being physically together was really hard for me to
Mhm.
understand and grasp. So when we reopened, I just decided that we just need a space where we can meet with our friends, we can be by ourselves and truly be in that moment. And that was important to me. So it wasn't about monetizing. A lot of people assume it's because, well, when people go with their laptops, they buy a cup of tea and they sit there for 6 hours. Honestly, people will sit there for 6 or 8 hours now too with only buying a cup of tea, but they're engaged. And if you're playing a game or reading a book or knitting, the chances of looking up and seeing that someone is looking for a place to sit is much better than if you're on your laptop with your earbuds in, staring at a computer. And I wouldn't feel comfortable going up to someone like that and saying, "Oh, do you mind if I sit next to you?" Whereas if someone's like knitting, I can start a conversation. "Oh, that's really cool. What are you making? That's great. Do you mind if I sit here?" "Yeah, no problem." And so it's just engagement and just honestly like looking at someone in the eye and saying hello.
I absolutely love that. For a lot of the cafes that I go to today, I've noticed that it's become more of like a second office rather than a gathering space. Instead of like, as you mentioned, people talking and laughing, I usually just hear like typing, just a whole wall of typing. And I find it so empowering that Tea House has the no laptop and no Wi Fi policy, especially since it's so like different. But it isn't that crazy considering that cafes were meant to do that. It's just changed
Exactly.
nowadays because of COVID and, like, the digital age.
Yeah. Also, I feel like we're especially being in a university town, there are
Mhm.
amazing libraries. There are
Yeah.
amazing places that you can go. And I don't feel like me taking that away from anyone really changes how anyone can live their day to day life. So,
Yeah, exactly. I so agree. I feel like, yeah, if you wanna study, go to a library. If you really need to study, just go to a library. You don't have to come to a cafe, and, like, I once I was in a cafe and I was talking with my friends, and the people next to me were studying, and they're like, "Can you keep it down? We are in a cafe. Like, it's not a library. Like, you're
yeah.
you're gonna be fine." But since you were mentioning how Tea House is also an event space along with a cafe. How do you think that it's shaped the community around built around the store?
I mean, since day one, like I said, it was very important to me that if we were not open for business, my space was available for community involvement, like or community meetings, community groups, that type of thing. So that's always been important. And also having knowing that I would be raising my children at work. They at a very young age, I think age 6, they were taking the public bus from school straight down to downtown by themselves. This is where they, you know, honestly, we spend far more time hours wise in my store than we do at home. And I can
Mhm,
remember the first couple weeks of COVID sitting outside with my family and saying, okay, so, well, what are we doing? And they're like, well, this. And I'm like, what do you mean this? What are we doing here? And they're like, this. And I'm like, yeah, no, what are we doing? They're like, Mom, we're weekending. I'm like, oh, okay. So because I had never really weekended it as a verb before. But it was just important to me knowing that my boys were going to be raised here. I'm not a stay at home type person. So building that community for my children and my family here was very important to me. And so we had, for example, a homeless man who lived in our bathroom here at TeaHaus for almost 7 years. And now for them, they're like, he's like their grandpa or their uncle or something. And I can remember telling people like being so surprised. Oh, you let your children take the bus. I'm like, it's okay. Chief picks them up. Well, who's Chief? Oh, he's the homeless guy that sleeps in my store. And I'm like, oh yeah, that probably sounds worse. But I wanted that for my children. I wanted this to be their community because I knew I wasn't going to be someone who was going to hang out at my house all day.
mhm.
And I don't know. I mean, you can talk to my kids about it, but they seem to have turned out okay.
Yeah, I think so too. Andrew's a great person. Um, I also read in one of your interviews that like you really focused on accessibility when bringing Tea House to Ann Arbor, especially since tea can sometimes be like an exclusive posh hobby.
Yeah.
How do you think the community has taken that?
I mean, it's really funny being in a city like Ann Arbor where people are
Mhm,
like, oh, what's your biggest competition? My biggest competition is probably someone coming back and saying, well, when I was on sabbatical in Sri Lanka, I tried the tea from the blah, blah, blah region. And my competition isn't, oh, I was at the mall last week and I bought this tea, or I was at the grocery store and I bought this tea bag. In that sense, I love Ann Arbor, but we
mhm,
can be slightly holier than thou, kind of more intellectually snooty, so to say. And so I think that making it not a snooty thing, I mean, making it very accessible. A lot of the other tea sommeliers that I know, they wear like tuxedos and white gloves when they're serving tea at really fancy
mhm.
hotels. And I'm like, come on, guys, you're serving the same tea I am. And I trained you, and I didn't want it to be like that. And so I wanted it to be something where you can come in and be like, hey, so actually, I don't really know if I like tea or not. We have 230 beverages and we'll find something that you can enjoy.
Mhm,
And bringing the cocktails and the zero proof mocktails really helped as well in the sense that like if you want to go out at night and you are of mixed ages or some people don't want to drink or they do want to drink, my problem is I don't actually drink a lot, and so I would go out with friends and I would end up with a water and a plate of french fries because most of the bars or restaurants don't have very good desserts, nor do they have good coffee or tea later in the evening. And so I wanted a place where you could go with your older friends, you could go with your parents, you can go with your younger friends, and everyone can have something. You can get a dessert, you can get something savory, you can get a cocktail, you can get a cup of tea, you get iced tea, and just hang out.
mhm. I love that. Yeah, it's just such a wonderful place. Going
Yeah.
back to like your comment about your only competition being like somewhere far off and different. I've noticed that your tea is from all over the world, and I was just wondering how you sourced it and what that international relationship looks like up close.
Oh, that's a good question. I just got back from Taiwan, for example.
Mhm.
I
I
was
saw that.
meeting with the Taiwanese Tea Council. I've done the same with Japan, for example. But it kind of all starts from when I was in Germany. I mean, Germany is the largest tea purchasing country in the world.
Mhm,
They're also kind of the strictest when it comes to quality controls. And so when I was doing consulting work, that's kind of how I fell into it, so to say. I got to work with a lot of the different growers and gardens, helping develop tea training programs. And so I was very lucky in that sense that I got to, I mean, my interest, I always drank tea. I mean, I was very interested in tea. I wasn't a big coffee drinker. Again,
mhm,
I don't drink a lot of, I'm not a big cocktail or beer drinker or anything. So when I did consulting work, that was usually what I would do is find the closest tea store and just kind of go and have fun in there and, smell things and buy and try new and different things. So, and then being able to turn that into something as, like TeaHaus is awesome. So I think the
Mhm.
international, I do have really good relationships with some of the gardens. I make sure that all my tea is either coming from gardens that I have met personally. I've been there. I've worked with the farmers themselves, or I get it through Germany because I know it will be tested for
Mhm.
pesticides, heavy metals, that type of thing. And so when I was in Taiwan, for example, I was there with one of the German tea testing companies and talking about what would be best for the US market versus like the European market. Because now that tea is becoming more popular in the US, we do have to kind of differentiate ourselves from
Mm.
the different more classical markets for the tea industry.
That's really interesting because, like, you see Tea House, it's just downtown, it's across the street, it's like your community tea store, but then there's a whole network behind it. I find that so intriguing. It's, like, very similar to everyday items too. It's like, wow, I'm just using my computer, but then you're like, "Oh, this is sourced from, like, all over the world."
Yeah, definitely. And I think that hit home really hard with people when it came to like the tariffs, for example, and
Mhm.
like how those
Yeah.
tariffs affected, that cup of tea you're drinking. I mean, that was picked by a person who then would put it in a basket, who then put it wait, but was that basket did that bag or that basket have an element in it, for example, aluminum that was going to be tariffed at a different rate than the tea? And then, it's pretty crazy that here this little tea store in Ann Arbor is so affected by
Mhm.
so many global factors.
Yeah, and I bet it was complicated when the tariffs were
Still is.
enacted. Yeah.
Oh, it still is.
Yeah. That is something that, I mean, I feel like an investigative journalist could, like, do a deep dive on, and you would never expect it, especially from just, like, a local community tea store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah. Just, like, a fun question that I was really curious about. Have you ever accidentally converted a hardcore coffee person to tea?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I there are people who are like, "I don't like tea," and I'm like, "Challenge on." And even, to be honest, like, some of my employees, they kinda come to me and they're like, I'm not sure how much, a tea I drink and this and that." I'm like, "That's fine, as long as you're willing to learn, and when you work here, obviously, you can drink as many different teas as you want." And, I know when my older son started working with a friend, more like officially, they both came up with spreadsheets on their phones, and they rate each tea, and then they rank them, and they have tasting notes for each one and that type of thing. So that's really fun, and a lot of our customers do that as well. But I think we will always find something that someone can drink, whether it be
Mhm.
a fruit tea, an herbal tea, a rooibos tea. There's something here that everyone can get down, and eventually they're like, I kind of like that. One of my very first employees admitted to me, she was a friend of the daughter of my husband's friend, and she was her first job, and she was in high school, and she really quietly and sheepishly came up to me and admitted she had never actually drank tea. And now she's in her mid 30s, and I will get texts sometimes. She lives in Brooklyn, and I'll get texts sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning. She's like, "I'm having an argument about ruby red Taiwanese tea versus versus like Oriental Beauty Taiwanese tea." And I think, and I'm just like, okay, it's 2 a.m. But I'm glad you're and I have 6 employees who have the tea leaf tattooed, 6 former employees, people who have, like, graduated, moved on from Ann Arbor, who have the tea leaf tattooed on them.
Wow.
I can't even commit to that.
That's kind of insane. Coffee, it's kind of difficult to differentiate, like, the different notes and the different flavors, but with tea, there's just such a vast variety that, like, some people can say that they hate coffee, and I'm like, "Okay, like, it's bitter, I get it." But if you say you hate tea, it's like, there's a lot of different teas.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hate all of them? Like,
Yeah, you're like, let's talk about
yeah.
that."
And now for our, like, more general questions. The first one is, for all the young girls out there hoping to start businesses of their own, what advice would you give them?
That's a hard one because my advice usually is to people, if you can work 10 years, not pay yourself, and be willing to put in, I mean, wow, I would say even with kids, I mean, I would be here probably 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I try to limit myself to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week now. But you have to be willing to work. And everyone thinks, oh
Mhm.
my God, it's so cool. You have this tea store and you get to sit and you talk. Yeah, I also have to plunge toilets. I also have to sometimes do some really disgusting things like, cleaning whatever, because someone forgot to put a dish away or what, those are the things that I think. So I think that absolutely follow your dream, absolutely do it. But I always tell people too that the word passion I think is a little overrated. People are like, oh my
Hmm.
God, this is your passion. I was like, you know what? That's a very overrated word. And I always tell people that don't necessarily need to follow your passion. You should find something that you enjoy doing and work really hard at it. And if you're
Hmm.
lucky, you will become passionate about what you do. But no
That's
one has the right to be happy. You have the right to pursue happiness. And
hmm.
that's the same thing with a passion. You don't follow your passion, you create your passion.
Actually really like that advice because I mean, these days everyone wants to create something of their own and they're like, "Oh, like I'm just going to go and like I'm going to succeed on the first try and I'm just going to follow my dreams." But it's like the opposite. Like yes, you are going towards that direction, but you don't follow your dream. You're
Yeah.
actively working to make that dream reality. Like it's not something you follow, it's something that you work towards. Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to get a boring 9 to 5 job that you
Mhm.
don't want to do because in the end, it's gonna cost you $250,000
Yeah.
to start a business, and
Yeah.
you don't wanna be I was able to start my business without any debt, and that
Mhm.
is the biggest advice I can give someone is don't expect anything from anyone,
Mhm.
and again, I don't really care what your passion is. If you're
Mhm.
not willing to work hard, then who cares what your passion is?
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. I've been there's like this phrase going around online it basically goes, everyone wants to be a DJ, nobody wants to dance. And I think this kind of follows along that thread because everyone wants to start their own business, but you know, it's kind of a saturated market. And if you don't like if no one wants to dance, no DJ is going to like actually be popular, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Same thing. And again, I think again, I always tell my kids and people this again, you have the right to pursue happiness. You don't
Mhm.
have the right to be happy. That's the pursuit of that is what is what is often forgotten. That
Mhm.
an expectation was, well, I'm not happy, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, that's
Yeah.
not my problem.
Yeah, literally. And now for my final question. What do you hope people remember about Tea House? Like not just the tea, but about what you've built.
I think the community aspect
Mhm.
of it. I feel like, everyone always asks about legacy, especially now with both my boys going to be in college and being empty nesters. And I always say, I'm not an empty nester. I have another probably 3 or 4 thousand kids out there, and those are the employees that have come through my door. I'm definitely more of a momager than a manager, and all my customers and obviously my boys are obviously they're far more important in the grand scheme of life, but I don't know what the legacy will be because to be completely honest, I'm still pivoting. I'm still,
Mhm.
I think I'm not ready to know what that mark is that I'm going to leave because I haven't finished drawing the picture. So,
Mhm. Wait, I like that. I really like that. Yeah, you're so right. Because I mean, you've already established your presence as like reviving the third spaces in Ann Arbor, and that's already such a big legacy, especially since they're disappearing on us one by one. And there's still room for change. Like there's so much time left. Yeah.
yeah, I get bored real easily, so who knows what's next.
Me too. But yeah, that is the end of our interview. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
me.
you.
That brings us to the end of this Under the Canopy episode. If you found value in this episode and want to hear more, kindly subscribe or follow and leave a review. Hope to see you soon on next week's episode.